So, welcome everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. Hope everyone had an amazing Labor Day weekend and ready to kind of start fall afresh. And hopefully, we're going to have a good strong September season this year. I've talked to a lot of people who say that we have a lot of reservations this month, so that's promising. So, this is a presentation that we're excited to present today. I guess I need to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Shepard. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here in Durango. We are part of 15 SBDC centers in the state of Colorado. There are SBDCs across the country. We're actually a program of the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and we are one of 15 centers. Our headquarters are up in Denver in the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Our center, which serves the 5 counties and 2 tribes of Southwest Colorado, is located here at Fort Lewis College. They are our host. We're in the new Innovation Center here in Durango. So if you haven't been in to visit us, please do that. So we're really excited to have you here. We do offer free one-on-one consulting to small businesses and a number of trainings and workshops that are at low to no cost to you. So if you don't know a lot about the SBDC, do come and check us out. Hannah, will you change the slide? I don't think I can. Maybe I can. Let's see if I can. Nope. Hey, Rich, will you have Hannah advance the slide for me?
I did. Is it not showing for you?
I just need it to move to the second slide.
I did.
No, it's not. It's still showing the first slide.
Okay. Hold on, let's see what. I don't know what it's doing. It's on my second slide.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, so, and the slide that we actually skipped over was our contact information, but you can find that at sbdcfortlewis.org. That's our website. If you go there and click on consulting or click on training under the What We Do tab, you can register for consulting with us. Reach out if you have any questions. Today, the webinar that we're presenting is called Top 10 Fatal Mistakes That Small Businesses Make and How to Avoid Them. And this is a webinar that we have done, a workshop that we have done in the past, has been very successful. We're really excited to have Rich Lindblad able to teach this class for us one more time before he retires from our services. Rich has been with the SBDC. Hannah, do you want to go to the next one? Rich has been with our SBDC for over 15 years. He's been a huge asset. I think he's probably worked with the majority of businesses across the region at some point or another. So we're really excited to be able to have him present this one more time before he and his wife move down to Tucson. Hopefully we'll still be able to bug him a little bit while he's down there, but we'll let him retire at least a little bit. So I'm going to turn this over to Rich, and I'm going to let him go ahead. I know he has a lot to say, so I don't want to take up too much time. So welcome, everybody. Thank you, Rich, and I'll pop back on again at the end.
Good. Good morning, folks. Thanks for taking the time this morning to be with me. I've had the pleasure of working with. Good. We're just trying to get the screen set up. I've had the pleasure of working with many small businesses over a fairly large number of years, and during that period of time, I took it upon myself to collect some data and realized that there was a common thread that went through many of these small businesses in terms of some of the mistakes that they were making. And so in that effort, I tried to assemble some of this information and make it available to people like yourself so that you don't fall into that same trap. A little bit of administrative information first before we get into the slides. I'm probably going to talk for an hour, and so you can jot down your questions, and if you want to ask questions in the chat box, you can certainly do that. Mary will attempt to answer those questions. For those questions that are directed to me, you can either send them in, get them to Mary, or get them to Hannah, and I will answer your questions directly to you by way of email. And so I think that would be the fairest way to do it, because I'm going to eat up most of 55, 60 minutes worth of our time this morning. So with all that said, some of these slides will take 5 or 10 minutes to talk to, and I try to use real live examples to support my arguments for what the mistakes may have been back then. And so I'll without naming the names of any particular business, we'll use real live businesses and give you some demonstrations for how they fall into these mistake worlds, and hopefully it'll make more sense to you as we move forward. So let's go to the first slide. My first slide is all about pricing either your service or your product, and how you get there. How do you get there in terms of how did you set the price for what you're offering? And I ask the question of the folks that I work with, who are your customers that you're pricing these things to? And I like to call this particular slide my trap slide, TRAP, because I find that more people fall into a trap of setting a price because they didn't know how to get there. And so I'll give you some examples as we move forward here. I like to spend most of my personal time in the value-added pricing world. And so I have something to sell, whether it's my service or a product, and I try to wrap that particular product or service with something in addition of value. And it differentiates me from my competition. A very quick example is I do personal consulting with people, and instead of just charging them an hourly rate, I may argue, or I may sign a contract that causes me not to send them a bill for my services until they're totally satisfied with my work. My competition doesn't do that. That's a value-added pricing strategy. You might also, if you're starting your business, look around and try to decide who your competition is, and feel that you have to be a very competitive price entity. And so you may choose in your world to create your pricing structures based upon the competition that's going on. In that same breath, you may also choose to understand what your cost floor is. What is the cost of producing a particular product, or the cost of creating a service, and then incrementing that cost to a price point to sell it in the marketplace. The fourth bullet there is called commodity pricing, and I personally try to steer away from it because it doesn't allow much leverage for me. And I'll give you an example of what commodities are. You and I go to the supermarket and you buy a loaf of bread, a loaf of white bread, and whether you've gone to Albertsons or City Market, that sleeve of bread may cost $1.59, and it's $1.59 whether you go to City Market, it's $1.59 whether you go to Albertsons, it's the same price. And while it may have a fairly consistent margin, there's not a lot you can do with it. You can't modulate the price too much, and you hardly ever see, if you get a flyer in the mail with advertisements from either of those two stores, with them selling bread at some discount price. Similarly, there was a day when you and I may have chosen to buy gasoline from a gas station because the product had some enhanced additive that made it unique in our mind. That's not the case today. You and I would probably both agree that gasoline, as we see it advertised on the street, is consistently the same, plus or minus a few pennies. And it's fallen into that commodity world where our behavior has been restructured to think about who has the best price and not worry about the performance of that gasoline, because for the most part, they're all the same. And so commodity pricing is not an area that I want to spend much time in when I work with folks like yourself. And of course, the last bullet is sole source pricing. It's unique in its own right. If you've got something that's special that nobody else has, you can argue that you win. And if you have identified who your potential customers are, they may be willing to spend far more than what it cost you to produce. I fall back again to the gasoline model. And as you and I are driving over the pass, and all of a sudden your car starts to alert you that you've got 1 gallon of gasoline left, and you begin to panic for fear of running out of gas. And sure enough, you drive into this podunk little community, and there's 1 gas station with 1 pump, and the price of gas there is $3.59 a gallon. You are absolutely happy to pay $3.59 a gallon. It's a sole source price, and it allows you to go on your way. And so my argument is, for those of us that are selling products or services, if you can focus your attention on adding value to what you do, I think you can differentiate yourself from your competition and allow customers to want to be part of your space. I'll give you a quick example of that. In my previous life of being an entrepreneur and starting and selling businesses, one of the businesses that I sold was, or ran, was a Christmas tree farm. I started it from the ground up and planted 12,000 Christmas trees over a period of 4 years. And after 7 years of growing, first batch of these trees was ready to be sold. And I had to hire some workers and high school kids to come up and help me sell trees. And the first question I asked my work staff was, "What are we selling here?" And they said, "Christmas trees." And I said, "No, we're actually selling experience. The experience of being in this outdoor world of Christmas trees and enjoying the festivity of the holiday. And it's going to be a memory forever for these folks." And so the price points that I had on Christmas trees was substantially higher than what you and I would pay if we bought it all bundled up at a stand. And we took pictures of families as they chose their tree in the field, and it became a memory forever. That was a value-added pricing strategy that I chose, and it was something that worked very, very well, and I ended up with repeat customers year after year after year. And I didn't have to worry about competing. I didn't have to worry about cost plus pricing. I wasn't selling commodities, and I was not even in a sole source pricing world. So that's the message that I want to leave you with on that particular slide. We're going to move on to slide number 2. And I'll come back to this a couple times during this talk. And this is a metaphor, if you will, that you need to move from behind the counter, working in your business, to working on your business. And what that says is simply we get consumed by our daily activity of being in the business, the day-to-day stuff that we do. And it literally consumes all of our working time. And it leaves no time for you to be thinking about, where am I taking this business? What do I want it to be tomorrow, next month, in 6 months from now, next year? And unfortunately, working in it detracts us from its future and your personal future. And so I ask you to think about that concept, because it comes back and bites us all too often. And it's not until somebody like myself gets asked to participate in your world and we start talking about what's working and what's not working, that we uncover this issue of moving the business in a different direction. And that's the message that I want to leave you on that particular slide. Topic 3 is knowing when to pivot. And we had offered a webinar here 3 or 4 weeks ago on just that topic, pivoting. You may have operated a business for a number of years, 5 or 10 years, and then all of a sudden something happens in the environment, as we've experienced in the last 4 or 5 months, that change everything. And it requires that we think differently about how we're going to survive and what are we going to do differently to give our business new life. And so let me give you an example of one particular business that I worked with that needed to pivot and couldn't. This particular business was part of our 4-county region, to be nameless, and it was an art store. And this lady called the SBDC and asked to have somebody participate in her world. She was open 6 days a week, and she was barely making her numbers, and she wanted somebody to look at her operation, and I just happened to be the fortunate one to participate in that space. And when I showed up at her art store, she said, "Well, what do you want to do first?" And I said, I'd like to sit in the corner of the room and just watch foot traffic." And her business, her retail store, was set up so that you walked in a door and you sort of serpentined your way through the store and looked at works of art that were maybe on counters and lots of works of art that were on the wall, pictures and paintings and sketches. And I sat in the corner of the room and watched hundreds of people enter a door and work their way through the facility. And for every 100 people that walk through the store, maybe one considered buying something. And I thought that was kind of a tip-off to something that was not right. And so after I had that 2-hour opportunity, the young lady said, "Let me take you on a tour of the store." And we continued to walk through the store, and the first place that we stopped was a piece of watercolor on the wall. And I said, "Boy, that's a beautiful painting." And she said, "Yeah, that was painted by a local artist," and she gave me that artist's name. And the price of that particular art work was $10,000. And I thought to myself, boy, that's a pretty expensive piece of artwork for a touristy community. And my question to her was, "How long has that piece of artwork been hanging on the wall?" And she said, "I think around 2.5 to 3 years." And when she told me that, the red light went off in my head, and I said, "Boy, I bet you there's a whole bunch of other stuff in this facility that's very much like that." And so we continued the tour, and lo and behold, there were a majority of pieces of artwork that had similar characteristics, where they were painted by artists or sculptured by artists, and she felt an alliance to these folks to keep their artwork in her store. I would not hesitate to say that it was less about an art store and more about a museum at that point. And so after I left and went back and did some research and looked at similar art stores in Colorado and how long pieces of art either sat on a shelf or hung on a wall, the typical turnaround time was 53 days, not 2.5 years. And the typical price point for a piece of art for a tourist type person who may want to buy something and take it back home as a piece of memory was less than $100, not $10,000. And so when I finally had the opportunity to suggest that she needed to pivot and think differently about her store and take those pieces of artwork that are not selling and give them back to the artists and maybe lower her price point on things and select different consignment items that are more in the range of what tourists were willing to pay, she was incapable of dealing with that strategy. And I even suggested that maybe we could create a computer database that would report to her on a daily basis when unique pieces of art hit certain date limits. So it became an automatic turn back to the artist's product. And all of that technology and all of this concept of moving product in and through her retail establishment were just not part of her lifestyle. The long and short of this message is shortly after we had this discussion, months later, she went out of business because she was unwilling and unable to pivot when it was absolutely necessary to do so. And so give that some thought in your own personal worlds. If something is not working well for you, think about how you may take a hard a change to some other direction and try to follow where the market is moving. This is an important slide for me as well, and it's knowing something about yourself and the management style that you may have and the management style that you may need to apply for any particular business situation. And I categorize management styles into 3 buckets, them being autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. And very simply stated, autocratic management style is I'm the boss and I provide the direction for my organization, and there's a time and a place for that kind of leadership style. In the military, leadership is very autocratic. If we're going to move forward and solve military crises, you have to have very strict leadership rules and leaders. And so an autocratic leadership style is extremely important in that world. Democratic leadership style is very important in organizations where you have lots of creative people, and it's very difficult to demand things in that space. I happened to work in my previous life for a large corporation, and their style of management was very democratic. They were constantly looking for ideas and generating new thoughts and creating new product lines and service lines. And so you had to treat people in that way. The laissez-faire management style is one where you kind of let things happen, and you let things happen because you have to. A perfect example of a laissez-faire management style is a research and development organization, where you got lots and lots of very smart people inventing things. They may be vaccines, if you will, and they may be people that are inventing new cures for diseases. And it's very difficult to apply an autocratic or a democratic mindset when you have to let people go and be creative and work with teams of other people that have similar creative ideas. I recently had the opportunity to talk to a couple of restaurateurs. That shouldn't happen. My phone is ringing and I'm just going to turn it off. Sorry about that, folks. That won't happen again. I recently talked to a couple of restaurant owners in a local community here. And one of the restaurant owners has a perpetual shortage of employees. And I noticed every week in the classified section, he had an ad soliciting for servers and cooks and greeters. And I talked to him about that, and he said, "Well, you know, it's my restaurant, and I run things the way I run things, and if people don't like that, that's too bad." Very clear, it was an autocratic mindset. Similarly, I met with another gentleman who also had a restaurant almost adjacent to this person's restaurant, and he had a staff of workers who have been with him since he's opened 10 years ago. And I was fascinated because he doesn't run ads in the paper, and he's got 12 or 14 people that work for him. And I said, "So how do you do it?" And his answer was that every Monday he has a staff meeting. He personally makes breakfast for his staff. They sit around the table and talk about things that are working well. What are the observations that his workers may have about how to improve the performance of the business, and where are some of the hiccups in the operations of the business that they can all embrace and work toward making this a better place for not only the customers, but for the efficiency of the business. So two very different leadership styles. And the message that I want to leave with you here is that we all have unique leadership characteristics. You may tend to be more autocratic in your own personal life. You may tend to be more democratic. What we need to do is we need to learn when to apply each one of these particular leadership styles against the situation that we're in. And that makes for a better climate for your work environment, makes for a better climate for your customers, and it makes for a more successful business. So knowing your management style is crucial to being a successful entrepreneur. Topic 5 is you and your bank, and this causes agita for many of the folks that I talk to, like yourself. Some of the people that I work with get uptight about my position on this topic, in that they may argue, well, I don't like working with banks. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm self-created. I keep money under the mattress, and that's the way I run my bank, and that's absolutely fine. What I like to argue on this particular slide is that having a relationship with the bank is a good thing, and it doesn't mean that you need to borrow any money. You probably use the bank to process credit cards, merchant accounts. You may even have a checking account with the bank to pay your bills and to process incoming money. And what I profess to argue is that you need to take it one step further and share the performance of your business with that bank and create a line of credit. And I call it the emergency line of credit. Not that you want to be drawing on it frequently or even infrequently, but simply to have it. Have it for that emergency that we can't predict. And after a period of a year, if your business continues to prosper and your profit and loss and balance sheet looks better, then go back to the bank and share that new information with them and increase that line of credit, so that as you get bigger, you have more access to a credit line should you need it. There have been 2 occasions in the last 10 years One of them back in the 2008-2009 period when the economy tanked, and many small businesses were left without access to bank funds because they believed, as I just stated, that it wasn't something that they were willing to share with the bank. They didn't have a line of credit, and they needed to keep their business afloat when demand for their products or services dwindled. And so the only default position they put themselves in for finding money were credit cards. And so running your business on a credit card is pretty close to being a disaster. And in so doing, they needed to use those credit cards, maybe even to pay some wages and salary lines. And when they missed a few payments on the credit cards, the interest rates on those cards just went to some astronomical number of 30% plus interest. And it was a surefire way to set yourself up for total failure. And so I argue in this particular case that having a relationship with the bank is good. Drawing on credit from the bank is not necessarily that great, but having it there when you need it for opportunities to grow and to cover yourself in times of an emergency is a great way to protect yourself. Good debt versus bad debt is simple. Good debt is the kind of debt you create for yourself when you can buy something that causes your business to become more effective and efficient in the way it operates. You may buy a piece of equipment that allows you to accelerate the production of something or the service of something that you're provided to your customers. And the cost per unit just goes dramatically down as a result of that purchase. That's a good debt example. Bad debt is what I just alluded to a few minutes ago, when you used your credit card to pay for wages and salaries that have already occurred, and the money is just going down the tubes and doesn't produce anything positive other than keeping somebody employed for maybe a short period of time. And so it's an important consideration for you. Topic 6, and it is all about your business financials and how thin you can slice them. More than often, I hear from people that run businesses, it's not a space that I like to spend a lot of time in. My accountant handles all of my financials, and maybe every quarter, maybe every 6 months, he or she may send me a copy of my business financials, and I'll do a cursory look at the numbers, just to make sure that we're moving in a positive direction. More than often, a lot of small businesses don't even do that. They may look at their financials because the accountant sends them out once a year. And I've had more than enough occasions to work with people like yourself who believe that their businesses are doing great, and they may be in the aggregate, but things happen during the period of the year, and there are unique anomalies that occur that you may have been able to prevent, or at a minimum want to see occurring. And I argue that you would like to see your financials in the thinnest possible way that you can, so that you can experience the financial impact of that event on your numbers. And so I asked the question in that second bullet, how thin can you slice your view so that you see what's actually happening during that period of time, and you can react to it and know when it occurs again what to do about it. Topic 7 is all about seasonality. And if you're a business owner in this region, you pretty much experience lots and lots of seasonality. And while this particular chart doesn't reflect any particular business that I work with, I had the occasion, a number of occasions, to work with folks who would tell me that their net income for the year over the last 3 years has continued to go up, and they were very excited about that. I had one business in particular whose net income had been going up 15 to 20% a year for 3 years, and she said to me, but when I looked at the bottom line, we're making less money, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And Rich, I really need to have you help us try to figure out what's going on. We seem to be doing better and better and better and better, but we're making less money in general. And so I was invited to this one particular person's business. And if you look at that chart on the left, your left, that was pretty indicative of the seasonality that she was experiencing while it was not her particular business. She had, toward the balance of the year, a robust second half, but in the early parts of the year, in the February and March timeframe, there were significantly fewer tourists, and she had a full-time staff of people and ended up having to carry that full-time staff of people during that very slow revenue period. And so she, in the February and March timeframe, lost a significant amount of revenue, and it took another 2 months to recover. And so in that particular case, 6 months of the first half of the year, her net profit or loss was 0. And that was a revelation to this person, because one, she hadn't taken the time to do the slice it thinner approach to see what was actually going on. She was looking at the aggregate of a year and realizing that she was making more money total, but she could have intervened and done some things very differently in her business world to produce significantly higher profits. And you may say, well, what would you have done differently? And in her particular case was she had a staff of full-time people that she had built against this aggregate revenue number, as opposed to maybe developing a hybrid mixture of full-time and part-time people, where she could have modulated the part-time people to a lower occupancy in the February and March period, and maintain her full-time people during that period, and then just modulate them back into the flow of the mix for the rest of the year. She could have also done something which a lot of other businesses do when they get very slow, and that's simply turn off the lights for 60 days. And you can do that. There are a number of restaurants that just close and hang a sign on the door and suggest they've gone on vacation for 60 days. And that would eliminate the entire negativeness of that revenue stream. And so they're all options, but doing nothing and carrying $50 or $60 or $70,000 worth of negative income forward into the balance of the year is just not an acceptable way to run a business. Topic 8 is knowing what cash flow is and how to manage it. And as Mary Shepard mentioned early on, I've had the opportunity to teach a course called Leading Edge, and I also teach some entrepreneurial workshops. And I will frequently ask at the beginning of our semester for folks to tell each other or tell us what's the difference between cash flow and a profit and loss statement. And historically, I'll get a lot of folks who will argue that cash flow and a profit and loss statement are one and the same. And the answer to the question is they're not even close. And cash flow is just that. It is money flowing through your business, but it's real money. It's cash coming in and cash going out. And the difference between the two, that is cash flow and a profit and loss statement, is your profit and loss statement contains such things as accounts receivable, accounts payable, and depreciation. And you could easily have a business with a profit and loss statement that looks profoundly positive and profoundly successful, but it's laden with lots of accounts receivables and no cash. And that business may simply have to go out of business because it has nothing left to run itself with. And so cash is extremely important. And we do a whole 45-minute talk on if we're starting a new business, how do we manage our cash flow at the onset of this business? And so for this particular example, let me just talk for a second about a pretend, if you will. And the pretend is you and I decided we're going to start a business and we've got $1,000 in the bucket. And that's the beginning of our cash flow. And we're going to spend some of that to turn the lights on and start this business, whatever that business may be. And the first thing we have to consider for our business is we may be offering a service, and we may have to go out and buy some insurance to protect ourselves and protect the customer. So we go and we talk to an insurance agent, and we ask the insurance agent how much it would cost to get $1 million worth of liability insurance. And the answer would be $1,200. I just made that number up. Well, I only have $1,000 in my account to start our business. And so I asked that insurance agent, what are my options for paying for that $1 million policy? And very much like you and I buy car insurance today, the options for paying for car insurance are about 4 or 5. You can pay for that car insurance at the beginning of the year when you get the bill. You can pay for it quarterly with a $1 or $2 quarterly fee built on top, a service fee built on top, or you can pay for it monthly. And so in this getting started world of a new business, I could conceivably buy $1 million worth of liability insurance, which would ordinarily cost $1,200 for the year, for $100 a month. And so the need for me to manage my cash is paramount. And so I'm going to buy that $1 million policy with $100 for the first month and $100 for the second month. And in that first month, I've now still have $900 left in the account to continue to start my business with. And that's the concept of being able to manage cash flow, allowing my cash to generate more cash for the business by managing it well. And you'll find that lots of things that you have to purchase for your business can be purchased with different sets of rules. And so I simply ask you to consider that concept of working with your suppliers to elongate, when you need to, the process of paying for things. And as the business becomes more robust and has more cash available to it, and there's a net 10 or net 15 or net 20 day or 30-day opportunity where you can pay for things and take a discount, then you move in that other direction of paying for things with cash and then taking the discount. So it's a two-way street from a cash flow perspective, but it's also a mindset in terms of how you manage that greenback. And I hope that helps. Topic 9 is actually, and I've named the business. It was a dear friend of mine in Pagosa Springs who started this business, and he's an avid fisherman, and he invented a lead-free fishing weight. And if you and I have ever been associated when we were younger and maybe still fished at all, you may remember that we used to take those little lead balls and put them on the fishing line and then squeeze them between our teeth because it was soft metal, but it was pretty dense and weighty. And we learned later on that lead is not something we want to ingest, and it's harmful to our bodies and harmful to water, and it pollutes water, and it's harmful to the fish. And so lead fishing weights is still the baseline for fishing. And he decided he was going to invent a new fishing weight that was made out of tin and bismuth, and it had the same weight density as lead did, without the toxicity. And this was not his full-time job. This was just a part-time dream that he had. And he started manufacturing these little devices in his garage and putting them in plastic baggies with a great backboard where he could take the entire display of different sizes of fishing weights to local fly fishing stores in around the state. And every fly fishing store that he brought the product to embraced it and said it was the greatest product they had seen in the last 20 years. And so he was thrilled that there was a belief that moving away from the lead fishing weight to this more environmentally friendly weight was the way to go, and he was going to be hugely successful. The problem with the little fishing weight idea was they're very inexpensive, and while the margins are high, you got to sell lots and lots of them to make a fair amount of money. And every year he and his wife would take 2 weeks off from his regular job and drive around the 4-state region visiting fly fishing stores, and virtually every store that he went to saw the value in the product and purchased it. So at the end of 2 weeks driving around, he may have sold 50 or 60 of these display boards at $99 a display board, and have incurred 14 nights worth of motel rooms and 3 meals a day out, and gasoline for his truck, and 14 days worth of activity selling these things produced a net profit of probably 0. And so he called upon the SBDC to intervene and help him come up with a better way to, we'll use the term scale. And that is, how do you get these non-lead fishing weights into the hands of every fisherman, not only in the United States, but in the world? And that's the model that we were working toward. And so I'd asked the gentleman who owned the business to start thinking about concepts for scaling the business. And a few weeks after I had challenged him with this topic, he came back with an idea of hiring salespeople from around the country that he would obviously never meet, and they were going to be highly motivated with large commissions. And my pushback to that was that wasn't going to work because he never met them, and they would more likely just steal his idea. Long story short, we decided that the best approach would be to work with a company that may be able to wholesale his product and retail it at the same time. And my recommendation was that he consider somebody like a Cabela's or a DAS Pro, And he said to me, well, they're not going to want to buy from this little guy in Pagosa Springs. And I said, well, if you think that, you're probably right. And if you think that they will, you're probably right too. It's about your mindset. And so we worked for 6 months on trying to get in the face of Cabela's, and lo and behold, after 6 months, they realized that we were there to stay and play. And his non-lead fishing weights now appear both in Cabela's and in the Bass Pro catalog. And so it was a different mindset, but we now have a distribution channel for that product that is very different than driving around to local fly fishing stores. Topic 10 is doing an environmental scan, and I'll align myself again to what we talked about earlier in the talk for the gal that owned the art store. What I did for her was an environmental scan of her business, and it aligned itself very well with who's your customer. I'm trying to pull on all the topics that we've covered so far. Who's your customer? How do you price to them? What's the value proposition? What's working and what's not? What do you know about your inventory? All of those things that make it work are part of an environmental scan, or cause it not to work are part of an environmental scan. And if you find yourself in the need for something like that, please consider an SBDC person to have them come in and work with you and see your business in a different light, because they will. They'll see things that you don't see, and may be in a position to help you think through how to redirect the kinds of things that you're doing. I have one last slide, and I'm going to edit, and it's called a bonus slide, and the topic is asset utilization. And it's probably as important as the first slide that we talked about, and that was pricing. And what I mean by asset utilization, and you're looking at the picture of that large backhoe or scooper, is so many businesses discount in their minds assets that they acquire, and either penalize themselves or react inappropriately to the utilization of that asset. And I'll create a couple buckets for you. You can think about human resources as an asset, and you can think about equipment as assets in this particular picture, and you can think about real property as assets as well. In this particular case, we're looking at a piece of equipment, and it may be very expensive, a couple $100,000. And if it operates for a few days a week and then sits on a trailer and is not going anywhere for 3 or 4 days, waiting for its next job, that's an asset underutilization. And if you've got those kinds of situations in your world, you want to think about how you may be able to redirect that piece of equipment and have it do something else for you in your business. You may even lease it out. In the same breath, we have human resources that work for us, and we get upset with people when they don't work as hard as we're working, and we tend to beat up on them because we want them to mimic what we're doing, and so making that comparison between a physical asset like this piece of equipment, which we tend to divorce in our brain, and the people resources, which we see right in front of us, is an area that you need to reconsider in terms of how to make your business more effective and efficient. And that third piece, which is the real estate piece, is an area that many businesses may own the real property around them. And another example that I'll share with you just before we close is a gal that owned a cafe in one of the 4 communities that I work with, and she owned the physical building herself. And she was selling breakfast and lunches out of the business, and she contacted the SBDC after having run this for a couple, 3 or 4 years, and I happened to be her advisor, and she showed me her financials, and she was making a little bit of profit, paying herself and paying her workers. But for the amount of hours that she put in to be open 6 or 7 days a week, running from 6 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she didn't feel like she was getting the kind of return on her investment. And so my pushback was, you've got this huge asset that you're sitting on, and it's being underutilized, this physical resource of a building. And I could see the tears well up in her eyes, and she said, you really want to kill me because you want me to work longer hours. And I took her back to that second slide, which was working on your business, not in your business slide, and said, I didn't ask you personally to work in your business longer hours. I'm thinking about having you stay open longer and developing a plan that would utilize that resource, which is sitting there idle for an additional 5 or 6 hours a day that you've already paid for. And so once we got over the emotional piece, we realized that there was an opportunity to expand her presence by offering a late afternoon food and drink service to a different set of clientele in this community that had many tourists and timeshare folks that would show up late in the afternoon after driving all day, that really didn't want to go out to dinner but may enjoy sitting and having a glass of beer or a glass of wine and some finger food. And so once we got over that hurdle of reconsidering this physical resource and extending her day with a different staff of people and operating from 4 o'clock until 8 o'clock in the afternoon, serving wine, beer, and finger food, it became a huge success, such that that afternoon session dwarfed both her morning and noontime revenue stream combined. And so I ask you to think about, if you're sitting on an asset and it's being underutilized, how you may repoint it and continue to use it to make it more effective and efficient. So my clock says 59 minutes and 30 seconds. That's my 10 plus 1 slide show. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to participate in a SBDC webinar. And again, if you have questions that haven't been answered in chat by way of Mary Shepard, feel free to send that question to either Hannah or Mary, and they'll direct it to me, and I will personally answer your question. Thank you so much, and I hope you
Rich.
have a great day.
Hey, Rich.
Yes,
Let's do one live, because I have just one question in the Q&A, and the question is, how often should you run a P&L statement? Monthly? Are there other reports that are helpful to keep your finger on the pulse of your business finances?
Yes, very few people ask for cash flow statements. And so if you have a bookkeeper or an accountant, they will historically give you a P&L and a balance sheet. That data that they collect is also able to, the systems that they use are also able to produce cash flow statements. And once you get used to looking at the cash coming in and cash going out of your business automatically, it will become the default document that you'll look at more than often. Once a month is great. If you can do that once a month, I think you'll be way ahead of the game if you had ordinarily been doing it every 3 months, 6 months, or every 12 months. So move yourself in that direction. And if you're in a very volatile revenue environment, you may want to slice it even thinner, down to maybe a couple of weeks or even a week.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks on that. So, I mean, I would echo what Rich said too. It's really important to be watching those because that's where you find the trends and that's where you can get ahead. If you see something trending in a direction you don't like, that's the time to come and get help with SBDC or talk to your bank about a line of credit. I mean, those are the times when they can make those things happen for you. Obviously, if you wait until you're in a big fat pickle jar, it becomes a little bit harder to help you out. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. If any of this stuff that we learned today stimulates questions that you have and you need some one-on-one time, that's what we're here for. So please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have follow-up questions that you didn't post today and you want to throw our way, my email is shepherd_m@fortlewis.edu. And you can also find that on our website, which is sbdcfortlewis.org. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I just want to say thanks again to Rich for sharing all this knowledge that he's acquired over the years. He's been such a huge asset to us, and we're really, really going to miss him when he goes into retirement. So thank you again, Rich, for being such a huge part of what we do here and all the years of service that you've given to the SBDC and to the Four Corners and Pagosa. We are definitely going to miss you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead if there aren't any additional questions and at this time, and we'll go ahead and we'll sign off for today. So I thank you all for joining us. Please follow along. We've got some really great workshops coming up. We're about to announce our 6-part e-commerce series, which I think is going to be very valuable. If you've thought at all about whether selling online is a channel for you, please let us know. Not only are we going to look at e-commerce sites, but as a statewide network, we are putting together workshops on some of your other alternatives as well. So looking at selling on eBay or Etsy or Amazon, Instagram, and I think Facebook is coming out with a really robust selling platform as well. So stay in tune with what we're doing because I think we've got some valuable resources. For anybody who's interested in getting together in person, we are still holding our marketing happy hour this evening. We were doing those over at the Rochester Secret Garden, but obviously tonight is not a good night to be in the Secret Garden. So we will be here at the Innovation Center. So look for that on our website as well. If you'd like to join us, let us know. So with that, I wish you all a very happy and productive Tuesday and the rest of your week. And thank you again to Rich.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just stay until I see everyone's gone.